really delighted to be hosting this workshop that is part of UNI.MINDS festival. The mission of the festival is to strengthen the industry and academia partnership and grow the innovation community in Slovenia. You can find more information about the UNI.MINDS session at the event website and in the Huva app. You will find link in the chat box. You are all invited to use the UNI.MINDS Team backgrounds that you can see I'm using. And if possible, we would really like you to keep the camera on so that we can see each other and make this session more interactive. Today's workshop will be all about cybersecurity, and it will be led by Dr. David Modic. Dr. David Modic is a researcher, PI, and head of the Security Policy Group at the Faculty of Computer and Information Science at the University of Ljubljana. He is also affiliated with the Cambridge University Computer Lab, a senior non-residential member of King's College at Cambridge, and a visiting scholar at the Cambridge Institute of Criminology, and the former ChemCert Social Engineering Special Advisor. He teaches and researches security, as well as runs workshops on threat recognition and ethical hacking with an emphasis on human attack vectors. And now it's time to give the word to Dr. Modic. So Dr. Modic, the screen is now yours. I will stop sharing and you can take it over.
Thank
Enjoy.
You. Cool. So you can all see, right, the presentation. Okay, so first of all, before I start the presentation, I have a running deal with my daughter to tell a joke. So my daughter is she's a 4th grader, so don't expect too much. Okay, so a moth, so a night butterfly, flies into a surgeon's office late at evening, and the surgeon looks at the moth and he's like, so what brings you here? And the moth says, well, you see, everything is dark. I just, I don't see any point in living anymore. I just thought I would talk to someone. And the surgeon says, well, I'm a surgeon. I mean, I don't know much about this, but it seems like you need a psychiatrist. Why did you come to my office? And the moth says, well, the light was on. So, cybersecurity or cyber safety. So the way we will do this is, first, I'll tell you a bit about who I am. I mean, Jana has done this already. I'll set some ground rules, and then the workshop will be divided into 3 parts. So first, I'll just talk about the state of information security at the moment in the world and in Slovenia. Then I'll do a case study or 2 and some dilemmas that occur. And then I'll talk about recommendations. So as Jana has said, I'm Dr. David Modic. I'm an economic psychologist. I'm sort of fluidly employed at FREE, waiting for habilitation. Sometimes I am employed, sometimes I'm not, depending. I'm a CEO of a small consulting company. I was a researcher at the computer lab, deputy head of ChemCert, as Jana said. So CERT is, for those of you who don't know, this is Computer Emergency Response Team. So in Slovenia, we have one, which is CICERT. Well, we have 2, Slovenian and governmental certs. And this is a team that responds to incidents. So I was a deputy head at Cambridge for that. And I did my PhD at Exeter, where I'm a graduate fellow. So in practice, what I do is I deal with security incidents. So research, which mechanisms work well in social engineering and what kind of people hackers are, in essence. And there's my data. And at the bottom of the slides, there's my my email and my webpage if you're interested. Ground rules. So every once in a while, there will be a quiz tag. And at that point, I'll ask you to type in your answers into chat or turn on your mics and talk. However, it kind of turns out that if we do the mic thing, then people start talking over each other and so on. So it would be easier if you just chatted. hang on, let me turn the chat on now. Okay. Just a second. Yeah, okay. So this is the first rule. If you have a question, type it into the chat window or wave at me or throw a ship or whatever Zoom now does. I'm still trying to find the chat window. Okay. I'll leave about 10 minutes in the end for discussion. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about InfoSec foundations. Information security, so appreciable percentage of first world countries, GDP, so UK it's 1.9 billion over 2017 to 18, and US about 66 billion only in 2018 of dollars was spent on information security. The global market is estimated to be worth about 1 trillion. And it's a growth industry. In 2004, it was 3.5 billion in the US, and then in 2018, it was 114 billion. So what can we infer from this? What do you think? Yeah, this is business opportunities. It's a lot of money, true. Anything else? What do you think that means for people who, for scammers and for hackers? As you correctly point out, it's a lot of money. So essentially, it means this is like a cryptocurrency boom. So some solutions are adequate and some only make money for the providers. So if I'm somebody who provides security, I can see there's a lot of money. So in essence, I just try to sell. There's all kinds of people who sell all kinds of snake oil in information security. We get to the point where it's essentially people will just sell you black boxes and they say, well, you put this on, you put this into your network and everything, it's brilliant. It's gonna, you don't have to care about anything else. This is it. And to an extent, they're quite desperate. So we get to a point. So for instance, we were in Cambridge and there was like, it doesn't matter where from, there was a company and there's like two people trying to sell their product. And they're selling this black box, which is like, they use all kinds of buzzwords. They talk about blockchain and whatnot. And at one point in time, my friend, who is the head of ChemCert, says, well, I don't really like this solution. And they're like, what do you want us to change? I mean, is there anything? He's like, I don't like the color. And they're like, oh, we can make it red if you want, or blue, or violet. And we're like, okay, so, so this is where we are. Basically, you will do whatever we want just to basically sell this thing. So yeah, so it's problematic. Not all solutions are really good. Okay, so how big are the losses to cyber attacks? Just give me a guess. On a yearly basis, like let's say for first world countries. What do you think? It will be guesstimates for sure, but just to sort of see where we are. For first world countries. You can do worldwide if you want, but there's like precious little losses in Africa, for instance. 1 billion, 100 billions, I suppose 3 billions, right? Okay. So these are all good numbers, and they're probably just as good as most predictions floating around, because this was a trick question, generally speaking, because no one knows. And the thing is that it depends on how you calculate this. So there's a good article that I put in the notes by Ross Anderson, my former boss, and others, who have looked into the actual cost of cybercrime. And they've approached it in a way where they actually looked at the total cost. It's not just like how much money is stolen, but then there are costs in anticipation of cybercrime. So antivirus and software compliance and penetration testing, which you need to pay in order to prevent. There are costs that are consequences of cybercrime. So direct losses, but also like weakened competitiveness, loss of reputation, and so on. There are costs in response to cybercrime, such as compensation payments to victims and fines paid to regulatory bodies. So basically, you pay back, the victims of, who basically suffered because of it, like Zoom, for instance, who has had several, security breaches. And then there are indirect costs. So reputational damage, loss of confidence, in general, in cyber transactions, and so on. So there's all kinds of things. And basically, they postulate that I think it's about 12 billion for the US alone for 1 year, if you calculate all of those. But like I said, this was in a sense, this was a trick question. Please don't be offended. So just a bit of fun. So how likely is it that any given entity that has some utility will be breached at some point in time? So I'm using the word utility as in economic terms, which means any kind of good. Okay, so usually it's used as to mean money, but it could be free time, loss of sleep, happiness, intellectual property. So how likely is it if you have a company, or could be a public organization, university, whatever, that any company that has any kind of utility will be breached at some point in time? Very likely, 99%. Yeah, I would actually say 100. Everybody gets some sooner or later. Okay, exactly. It's not about if, but it's about when. Yes, that's absolutely true. So it's roughly 100%, give or take. And what does the severity of the breach depend on? So, how much losses there are. What do you think? Yeah, it depends on preparation and post-festum handling. Yes. Yeah. Well, it depends on how good you prepare, and how you handle the aftermath. Okay. So generally speaking, when I talk to companies and when I talk to large companies, I'm upfront about these things, and I tell them, look, basically, you hire me, I consult, and that doesn't mean you will be 100% secure. I mean, anybody who says 100%, security, they're basically lying, or they're stupid. Neither speaks well about them. So essentially, what I am offering you is that instead of 10 million euros, you will lose 100,000, or 1 million. Even if you lose 1 million, that's 10 times less. And in that respect, basically, paying me however much I want is chump change. So just it pays to be upfront about these things, because you cannot actually guarantee security, but you can make it harder, to breach. And it really depends on how you handle afterwards, the fallout. So what are some of the biggest flaws of cyber defense? Just speculate. What do you think, are the biggest flaws? Human error, sure. So human attack vector. Anything else? I will talk about human error for sure. That's my area. But yeah, I'll give you a few examples. I know it's hard, and it's hard to speculate. And it's also hard because, we're not in the same room, and that, it would be easier to chat. So it's, first of all, it's reacting, not acting. So the way security industry is done is that there's a new attack, there's a new type of thing, and everybody reacts to it. And at that point in time, the scammers or the hackers or whoever has moved on to the next thing. And I used like sea shoes in airports, for example. So this is the thing. So there was one point in time where there was a person who tried to smuggle liquid explosives in, their Air Nikes, in the soles of their sneakers. And that was a one-time thing, right? It just happened once, and they were caught. And from then on, for the next 10 years, everybody had to take their shoes off in the airport. And it's like, it's totally pointless. I mean, no sane terrorist would do it now, you see, because they know that you can be you would be caught. But this is about reacting, right? So there was explosive once, so we just go all out, and now everybody is inconvenienced, and it's not safer, if you see what I mean. So that's one example. Another one is like ignoring typical patterns. So I'll give you an example from NATO Locked Shields 2019. So Locked Shields is it's possibly the biggest hacking exercise in the world. So all NATO countries, they send their teams for a week to Estonia, and they fight each other like, you know, it's a hacking competition run by the military, by NATO. And in 2019, I was part of the group that was designing this exercise. And we did a proof of concept, first of all, before we actually started. And when we did that, there were two attacks, right? One was like there was a server, a file server where the files were not secured properly. And the other one was poisoning a water supply in a particular city where the server was. So it was a two-pronged attack. And unsurprisingly, like most people focused on the server. So the team that actually won the proof of concept actually, you know, saved all the files and had all the people die in the city because they were poisoned. And we pointed out with colleagues that perhaps we need to score these exercises differently, because you can't really win if everybody dies. I mean, it is true that your data is totally secure if nobody alive is there to see it. However, you know, this is not how it works in real life. So hackers usually do that. They will do a misdirection. There will be something that everyone focuses on, and there will be something that slips by unnoticed and is the real attack. Okay. So, and mostly, I mean, hackers basically count on you ignoring this pattern, and this happens, you know, all the time. However, it's still, you know, the buttons that they push still make people focus on stuff that's really unimportant in the grand scheme of things, or less important than the actual attack. And then there's focusing on wrong attack vectors. And this will be, I'll talk more about that on the next slide. And there's a lot of buzzwords, like, you know, SOC, which means Security Operations Center, or blockchain, or AI, or biometrics, or whatever. It's just like, you know, people say this word and everybody's like, "Who? This is the new, you know, newfangled thing." And I was just recently, I was chatting with a colleague of mine, a professor from TalTech, from Estonia. And I said, look, you know, if I hear, you know, another person referring to blockchain, I'm just going to lose my mind. And he's like, yeah, well, you see, when I get PhD students and they want to do blockchain, like my first question is, can you please define it in mathematical terms? And, you know, that makes me lose a lot of PhD students. So there's a lot of buzzwords, and, you know, very many people, or most people, don't really know what they mean or how they are used or how they would be useful in security, especially. There's a lot of, there's like now, the buzzword now in security is AI. However, if you talk to security experts, for instance, if you talk to Gorazd Božić from CITSER, he'll tell you that most attacks, most, you know, high value target attacks are boutique ones, are basically made just for those targets. And, you know, their AI does not really help. So, okay, attack vectors. I said more on next slide. So roughly speaking, which are two categories of attack vectors? So two ways of attacking. What do you think? So who do hackers, roughly speaking, attack? Like two categories. Humans and machines. Valentin, you're rocking this. Yeah, it's mechanical and human-based attack vectors. So humans and machines, as you say. So which do you think are more common? Which one do you think is? Just type A or B if it's easier. Machines. Yeah. Yeah. Mechanical. Which are more effective, do you think? Yeah. Humans. Exactly. So, for instance, this is an example that I usually use is if you look at Cambridge logs, so IDS logs, so this is intrusion detection system logs. So it's a system that filters all the traffic. On like any given month, you will see that there's about 200,000 attempts per month of intrusion. And like mostly these are, DDoS attacks and WordPress and so on. So about 200,000. Out of this, about 1,700 are successful in a sense that some utility is lost. Doesn't need to be much. I mean, it's just like, oh, it could be a username, could be like a paragraph from an article, but something is lost, okay? Could be a small amount of money. So about 1,700. And out of those 1,700, all of them include attacks on human-based attacks. So when I talk to the industry, and people will say, well, so are you saying that, we shouldn't be investing like, £1 million into a, into a firewall? Well, you should be investing something into a firewall because, as you can see, Cambridge, there's about, an attack every, few seconds, essentially. And most of those are, are defended against. So the issue is not whether you should invest, but the mechanical measures are actually, once you invest enough, they're good enough. Everything that goes through is human-based. Okay? So why do you think human attack vectors are the most frequently abused ones? Is it cheaper to exploit humans than machines? It is actually cheaper. You need to have a lot of, you don't have to do any kind of real preparation to exploit machines. You just kind of run scripts. So it's cheaper to exploit human attack vectors. They require less prior knowledge. Sorry, I just noticed that I basically messed this around. They're cheaper to exploit in the sense of hardware, if you see what I mean. So for mechanical solutions, you usually buy all kinds of special tools, and for humans, you don't really need that. And they require less prior knowledge. So you don't have to study, the TCP IP stack for, the past 10 years to see, one flaw in like, 10 million lines of code that you can exploit. And it exploits common misconceptions of security personnel. So essentially, security personnel generally, mistrust users anyway. And so users believe them in the end. And, if somebody keeps telling you, this is Tannenbaum, this is, from 1930s, the idea that the way Tannenbaum postulated that was, he said, well, essentially, if you keep telling people that they are, a certain way, then, they will first, rage against it and try to defend, their own actions and say, I'm not like that, I'm not like that, stop putting this label on me. It's called labeling theory. And in the end, they ground us down. The world grinds us down. And people just figure, well, if they keep telling me, that I know nothing or that I'm stupid or that I'm evil, well, might as well be. It's a lot easier to just accept this. So, commonly security personnel just, expects users to be stupid and, keeps telling them that. And so users in the end believe them. And so, it's a lot easier to attack people who basically think they know nothing about security and they know nothing about computers and they're worried about, every click, and they cannot actually talk to security personnel because, if they call them every time, they're worried about, confirming something or escalating some privileges, the security personnel just go insane. And then, it's like, okay, I won't call them, but I don't know what to do. So, I'll just kind of close my eyes and click something. And, that's, easily exploitable. And there's misconceptions, and I'll talk about them now. So one of them is similarity. So this is essentially what also scammers use to rationalize what they're doing. So it's the assumption, similarity is the assumption that people are similar to us. So if I'm socially awkward, I assume that others are too. If I'm honest, I assume that others are honest too. So when scammers tell you, you know, you cannot cheat an honest man, that's total bullshit. It's a lot easier to cheat an honest man than a dishonest one, because a dishonest one will distrust you from the start, and an honest one will trust you. So, and here I'm basically using the the student. Well, I'm using an example. So years ago, there were some students who we agreed there was a competition that we would there would be a competition between Cambridge and University of Tallinn, so TalTech. And you know, the TalTech students did brilliantly. And at one point in time, they sent an email to you know, to a higher up person at University of Cambridge, and the email never arrived. So they essentially called the, you know, help desk, the technical help desk of Cambridge, and they said, well, you know, we've sent him this email. Why didn't it arrive? And they were like, oh, you know, why do you need the, you know, chief of security of Cambridge? And they were like, yeah, we want to invite him to a conference, which was bogus, by the way. And they were like, okay, fine. So basically the students just called and, you know, had their mail sent, even if it was blocked before. So, and when I talk to my students about this, and they will say, oh, they just called? They picked up the phone and called? And I said, yeah. And you know why? Because they're not as autistic as you are. I mean, that's the point. I mean, you know, don't forget that black hats have no issue with calling someone or showing up in person, going to a fake, well, not a fake, going to an interview with a fake, you know, CV, just so they get into the door. So do not assume, if you're a security, you know, professional, and like most of them are really introverted, if nothing else, do not assume that all the hackers are introverted too. Okay? So there's nerdism. So assumption that technical brilliance trumps all other concerns. So, and I mean, this is for real. So if you want to access Cambridge Computer Lab, what you need to do, I asked about this, like my colleagues when I arrived there, and they said, well, what you need to do is, it's so simple. You just need a Unix machine, like Linux or whatever, so that you can, you know, SSH into a Kerberos server, and there you get a token that lasts for 5 minutes. I mean, you run this script. So here's a script, you just compile it. It's so easy. You just kind of, you know, download the development tools and then run it on a Unix machine, compile it, run this script. You will get a token that will last for 10 minutes. And basically with this token, log into an SSH server, which will, you know, expect the token, and the token will run out. So do it quickly. And then it will allow you access through a tunnel to your machine. And I'm like, who does this? Does anybody access from home? And they're like, yeah, everybody does this. It's so simple. And I'm like, no. What is simple is people just installing some sort of remote desktop on their machines and then logging into this and bypassing all of this crap. Because this is just pointless. If you make a technically brilliant solution that is hard to use, nobody uses it. Okay? So it's a misconception that the only thing that's important is to have something that's brilliant, technically. It has to be easy to use. That's more important, even if it's less secure, because then people will use it. Okay? So do you think, now I'm moving on. So these were just a few of the misconceptions. There's more, but you know, we don't have oodles of time. So do you think black hats go in blind? Also, by the way, no, they don't. I hope that this no is for in the chat. So black hats are you know, malicious hackers. So unauthorized intruders into computer systems. I just use black hats for short. And by the way, if you didn't know, the term itself comes from Westerns, from like early black and white Westerns in the US, in Hollywood Westerns, where they essentially, so that you could immediately identify the good guys and the bad guys, the sheriff always wore a white hat and the bad guys always wore black hats. So this is where the term comes from, if you didn't know. So I'll assume that Valentin said no to this question. So black hats, do black hats go in blind? No, they don't. They will spend weeks or months gathering data. Will they attack only a single point of failure? No, no, they won't. Like, see, lock chills, 2019, as I've told you, there was a we do this constantly, even when we run exercises. And if you look at large breaches, this is what usually happens. It's like one thing and then, actually another. So will they tailor the attack to the target? What do you think? Yeah, well, yes and no. The run-of-the-mill, lower value scattergun approach, they will basically, they won't. They'll just kind of, run the same exploit everywhere and see, what sticks. However, for higher value targets, as I said, there will be a boutique attack, like, something that's tailored to the higher value. And that's why AI doesn't work. So good scammers and black hats have been abusing current events for their schemes since forever. Okay. So now I'm kind of, moving into like intrusion attempts in current times, to make this more current. We've spoken a bit about like in general, and now we're moving into more specific area. So good scammers and black hats have been abusing these current events for, for well above 500 years. We have Spanish prisoner letters examples, from 16th century. And there's documented, but we don't have photographs of 12th century, kind of same kinds of tricks. So this is advanced fee fraud. So I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's essentially the Spanish prisoner letter is kind of like there's some minor nobility in the UK gets a letter which says, "Hi, this is your third cousin Archibald. We met at Tiffany's party the other day. And I'm sorry, but I'm imprisoned in Spain. So if you could send a cart full of gold to Spain, like as a ransom, then as soon as I come back, I'll pay you off. I'll pay you back. It's not a problem. I mean, surely you know me. It's Archie, right? And the minor nobility thinks to themselves, well, I can sort of like vaguely remember an Archie. And yeah, it's probably the guy at the Tiffany's party. Yeah, probably. I mean, sure, who wouldn't help, the third cousin? Of course, not a problem. So they send the cart full of gold, which disappears, and that's it. It's exactly like a Nigerian scam, only, from 500 years ago. So, yeah, so this has been going on for hundreds of years. There's no reason why they would not abuse the pandemic for their schemes. However, there's also no, indication that it would sort of increase because of the pandemic, if you see what I mean. So CSERT reports both an increase in incident reports in 2000. So this was like their latest report, like from a month ago. So they looked at the incident reports and they really rose. However, it's the same frequency of actual incidents in 2019, which simply means that more people are reporting the same incident, because everybody is online. So we're sitting in front of our computers, we see more stuff. And people are doing their civic duty and they're reporting it. But that doesn't mean there's more incidents. The incident level is roughly the same as in 2019. It's just more people are talking about it. So the one difference between 2019 and now is that many people use the new platforms that were initially unprepared for huge influx of new users. And so that kind of segues us into our next part, which is case studies. So yeah, so SARS-CoV-2 arrives. So this is to set the stage for this whole thing. So COVID-19 arrives, pandemic is announced, public sectors, schools close down, and parents start homeschooling their our kids. So we start homeschooling. And e-assistant, so like the application, for like a virtual classroom, it crashes and burns in hours, in the first pandemic. It's literally hours. It's just done. So so teachers kind of they try to do all kinds of stuff. Arnes offers a distance learning app, so called Vox, or it used to, which was based on Adobe Connect, and that dies too, like almost immediately. It buckles under the load. So in all fairness, so I'm not criticizing Arnes. I mean, this was an unprecedented event, and the people who programmed e-assistant, they got like 10,000 euros. They did an okay job. but nobody would count that, their membership would like increase by hundreds of thousands in like a single day. I mean, we were all members of this, but before the pandemic, I went to like virtual classroom to the assistant like once in my life. I mean, I don't really. I mean, my daughter tells me whatever I need to know. I don't need to check on her through computers. So yeah, so Adobe Connect dies immediately. So and then teachers scramble, right? So you need to do something. And some, more tech-savvy folks use Big Blue Button or Microsoft Teams. Many pick Zoom, which is simple to use. It is free, to do, and it does what it says on the tin. Okay. So businesses also overwhelmingly pick Zoom, which they see as a better solution than Skype and less costly than MS Teams. Less costly in the sense that in order to use Teams, you need to have a Microsoft Office license, and some businesses don't have a license for everyone because then they might move to Open Office or whatever. So Zoom origin story is it was designed for ease of use. So security is initially like completely absent. Okay, so they have about 2 million users in February 2020. They're just one of many small business solution providers, right? They have the only security they have is security through obscurity. So nobody knows how secure they are, so they are secure. Well, that's what they figure. And for 2 million users, in the whole world, it's perhaps good enough. So now they don't tell us how many subscribers they have, and they have outright lied about this in the past. So they claimed 300 million users in April 2020, and then people started checking, and they changed Zoom changed their press release, and they said, well, when we said 300 million users, we meant 300 million meetings per day. So in early April 2020, security researchers uncovered Zoom selling personal information, so username, location data, device specs, and so on to Facebook. There is an instant lawsuit. Okay. Mid-April 2020, Zoom misplaces personal info of 500,000 of their users, so usernames and passwords. It just, they lose it. Happens. And April 2020, so several reports of intruders, breaking into Zoom meetings and playing like hardcore and child pornography. Targets are churches and primary schools. So I have the links in the comments. So if you will get the presentation, you can. This is all substantiated. I'm not just making this up. So in May 2020, Zoom observes people moving away from the platform and increases security, right? So because they start losing customers. So and in June 2020, they unveil further security measures. Like premium subscribers can now enjoy end-to-end encryption. And after all that, educators and those who work with vulnerable populations, they focus on how badly it sucks because it's harder to reach people, right? And they're angry at COVID, which is brilliant for Zoom. They're not angry at Zoom. And their focus is on, well, this is true. It sucks that you cannot console a child that's under stress and so on, and you don't have human contact, and there's less chance of socializing and so on. So this is all problematic. But perhaps, well, we'll see. Business people are worried about their company IP, being being stolen or compromised, but not about their personal data being stolen. They don't, they don't worry about that. Hang on. Yeah. So Zoom and information security. So initially, there is no safety. So no passwords or pins, no end-to-end encryption, 6-digit code for a meeting, which is later increased to 9 to 11-digit code. So a quiz, how did people exploit initial absence of security? I'm not asking what their end goal is, how they gained access. I'm wondering what you think. What do you think they did? Well, they did. You said, how did people exploit? And you said they should exploit it. Yeah, they did. They listened to meetings, sure, but that's also that's already the end goal. What happened. But what did you think? So I'll tell you, because perhaps this is it's perhaps too technical. Random numbers, yeah, it kind of works. What they did was they used a zombie farm. So a zombie farm is a bunch of compromised machines all over the world that's connected to them to sign into meetings. Okay, so let's say you have 500,000 machines, and you have each of the machines try to connect to 2 meetings. So 6-digit code is a million combinations, and it's a little less than that, because probably there's no 00000 combination, right? And probably and so on. So, but let's say it's 2 million. It's a million. Okay. So if you have 500,000 machines, each has to get into 2, right? To get into to try to get into 1 million meetings. If there is a live meeting, the script just signs off and writes the meeting link into a table that an intruder can consult, right? So it takes about 10 seconds, and you have the whole Zoom meeting space mapped, all the meetings that are running at that point in time. Okay. So if a meeting code goes from 6 to 9 digits, you possibly increase individual safety, of your particular meeting, but not if somebody is just looking for random meetings, right? In addition, if your meeting lasts for more than 10 minutes, you're compromised again. The only difference is that now my 500,000 machines try 100,000 or 10,000 combinations instead of 2. But it's a machine. I don't care if it works hard. It just takes a few seconds to do each combination, and then in about 10 minutes I still have everything mapped. So what can be done with the list of active meetings? You could inject content into different meeting spaces. So you could inject like child porn, just for laughs, or competitor commercials into business meetings. So I tried really hard, because I kind of vaguely remember there was a Coca-Cola meeting where they played the Pepsi commercial, but I couldn't really find the link for that. But it did happen. You can run environmental protection ads in business meetings, like Greenpeace, just some hacktivism. You could record content, for direct blackmail, for industrial espionage, advantage in negotiations. So basically, you're just a silent guest looking at the thing, and then a few days later, you have a meeting with the CEO where you negotiate a deal, and you know everything about their inner workings. You could do intelligence gathering on children for like indirect extortion. So for instance, if you go into classrooms, everybody has parents, some parents are influential people. So, you get information, through the children or about the children. I mean, there's plenty of information that can be gotten, generally speaking, from open source intelligence gathering. Every once in a while, I have students, run an exercise, and the things they come back with. So usually it's there's a company that agrees that they will be they are a willing target, although there is absolutely no need to tell them, because it's all open source. So basically it's all public information. But the information that I get, I mean, it's like, they tell me about, there was a specific company, and they said, okay, so this middle manager, they have 2 daughters. One daughter is 8 years old. Her name is XYZ. She goes to this primary school. She has violin classes every Thursday at 5. Here is an email of her, violin teacher. This is the location where she is and so on. And I'm like, okay, this is scary. So yeah, so basically you can gather a lot of information for indirect extortion or kidnapping, if you want. You can monetize metadata. So who met with whom and for what purpose. So you already know, so if there are mergers or whatever, you could get location info and physical intelligence. So, for instance, I'm talking from my office at 3, and you can see it's a large office. You can see a potted plant in the background, which has, by the way, fallen into a couch underneath it and so on. But you can see some things in the background, especially if people are on a laptop. You can see if there are windows where you can. So for instance, like next to me, there is a window, like, possibly it would be kind of hard because it's on the 3rd floor, but it would be possible to use a parabolic antenna to listen to me. I mean, you could just join the Zoom meeting, right? But generally speaking, you can see what equipment is used and what's lying around. You know when to break into home or office. So for instance, I'm now at my office, so you could assume that my home is empty. It is not, because it's pandemic and my daughter and my wife are at home. However, that would be an additional information. So Zoom then monetizes security, right? So they increase the meeting code field from 6 to 9 and later to 11 digits. And it's almost like they ran out of meeting space because of the increase of user base. And they need to have more meeting rooms. And then it seems like it's almost like they pretended that they're introducing a security measure. I mean, but surely they're not that coarse, right? Right? So, and then Zoom starts using PIN codes. You see, it appears as if security is now a lot better. So now you have a PIN code. But however, that PIN code is usually part of a link that is sent by email in advance. So the meeting particulars are available for longer. So now we know for a week, how to join a specific meeting. And people start using the same meeting room with the same pins for all their meetings. So the result, again, only one thing needs to be guessed. So this time it's the password, which people are notoriously bad at constructing securely, and security decreases, but the sense of security is heightened, right? So, and then Zoom introduces end-to-end encryption, right? But only if you pay. So which begs the question. So how useful is encryption if someone is already in the meeting? So end-to-end encryption means that the communication is encrypted, right? So nobody could listen in, between you and the Zoom server. So how useful is that? And also, how useful is encryption if the entity at the end of the tunnel that's encrypted will still access your data and sell it to the highest bidder? I mean, we don't know if they're still selling data to Facebook. I mean, I'm not sure that we can trust them about this. So they go on. So they monetize security. It looks like Zoom wants to monetize its popularity. It's only $20 per year, and create a sense of security without impacting, user experience. And it would be really bad PR to disclose either A or B, right? People don't like other people monetizing them, and they really don't feel secure if they feel that this is just for show. So therefore, Zoom claims that they're preventing terrorism by doing end-to-end encryption. Because yes, sure, because all the terrorists in the world say, well, I've just paid $10 million for a nuclear warhead, but $20 per year, I don't know if I can swing that. So we are targeted, the regular users, not the terrorists, okay? But we are stingy. And if not scared enough, but we are stingy if we are not scared enough, right? So why pay if free is good enough? I mean, we're kind of like, I don't need end-to-end encryption. I mean, who cares, right? Except, I mean, well, perhaps if we help, fighting the terrorists, well, for the US, this might actually work. But, Zoom has also found out that privacy is not really worth much, okay? I mean, sure, this is it sounds controversial. However, the thing is, if you look at research, it will turn out that most users, most people if you survey somebody, they will say, "Oh, privacy, it's very important to me. Really, this is like the most important thing. I need to secure my data, etc." And then the next step is you say to people, "Well, do you mind if we use your your registration data if we give you a 10% discount on your purchase?" Sure, not a problem. You see? So in essence, research shows that nominally privacy is worth a lot. However, literally, it's worth about $20, per person. So Zoom has also found out that privacy, it's kind of like, well, people are really all for it, except if they get a discount, or except if they have to pay, then they're not really all that for it. So they limit the meeting time to 50 minutes, right? And to 50 participants. So which straight up targets educators. Okay, so business meetings shouldn't really run longer than an hour. Also, more than 50 people, not really. However, for like a primary school or a secondary school, I mean, that's they need this, right? All kinds of there's like my daughter goes to like a Girl Scout meeting, and they're doing it through Zoom now. However, their meetings are 50 minutes now, because the 16-year-old girl who's running the Girl Scout squad doesn't have Zoom, and is reluctant to pay for it. So it's targeting, it's basically nickel and diming people who really can't afford it. It's so my point, generally speaking, is Zoom is not free. Okay, somebody always pays. So either the customers through subscriptions, or the car or medical or pharma industry for your data. Zoom always makes money off you. Either you pay for it, or somebody else will pay for your data, but it's not free. Let's not pretend. So none of the corporate services are free, to be clear. So Gmail is not free. They use targeted ads on you. They use your data to target ads. Okay. Facebook is not free. Exactly, yes. If you're not paying for it, you become the product. Yeah, right. Facebook is not free. Instagram is not free. We are paying for it all with money or data. Okay. So we get to like the third part, recommendations and wrap up. We're okay for time, right? Yeah. I mean, this is going to be a short segment. So specific comments. See how you're accessing this workshop? It's ironic, right? So we're using Zoom. You only need to sign up to the event. So I tried it, like 3 days before the event. You get all the info required to enter the meeting. I've just tried it. Any info is acceptable. Gosh, I hope no blackhead would stop as low to lie as to lie in a registration form. I mean, I could type in whatever. I can have, I have many Gmail addresses anyway. So, I used one that's actually is attached to me, but I could use any, and I could just be in this meeting. You would not, I mean, initially you have to write in your name, gosh, I hope nobody lies about that. So anybody can sign up. I have not tested it, as I prefer not to spend my nights being fisted in jail. But you could disrupt the meeting. Anybody could enter the event, find out who is busy listening. Perfect moment for a break-in, like kidnapping of children. So surveillance is now weakened. Thank you, Zoom, for letting the world know. Zoom and Facebook now know that you're interested in securing yourselves and your company. So it would be interesting to know, how soon will you start getting, targeted ads for security training and InfoSec products? Because this does tend to happen, as you know, on Facebook. So Zoom security posture can be summarized as: do nothing that would slow adoption rates. If caught in abuse, do something that increases profits and pretend it is about security. If called out on it, remain silent and wait for the storm to pass. Find ways to monetize fear. If that fails, pretend to provide a free service, but hobble it in a way that makes it useless without paying. So general comments. So nothing is ever free, as in lunch. So someone always pays, directly or indirectly. Social media is not free. Google is not free. Sometimes the scam or exploit is not what it seems. So in the case above, the misdirection is perfect. So people worry about obstacles in the teaching or business process, while their data and privacy are being monetized. Another example is personal protective equipment, governmental contracts in Slovenia. So we don't have the time to go into detail, but if you visit my webpage, bottom of the slides, and check out the free academia webinar that I did on the 28th of May, you can listen about, like, I did like the whole research about, how the money, traveled and, what happened with that. And, that's a perfect example of misdirection. So there are collateral effects. So pandemic sucks for everyone, but more for some than others. So I have recently bought a lecturing webcam, which I'm talking to you, from, which cost 470 euros, okay, in August 2020. Well, I basically, the price in August 2020, so before this new pandemic, was 214 euros. I have screenshots for this. So somebody is making wild money, monetizing the pandemic. So there are, collateral effects. So information security is big business with lots of money floating around, as we've spoken about. As everywhere else where the money is to be made, there are those who provide an excellent service and those who are looking to make a fast buck. The levels of incidents have not risen because of COVID-19, but the pandemic is being used in phishing and scams. Some technologies were never secure and are unlikely to ever be secure. Okay? Nothing is ever free. There is a need for high quality training in cybersecurity, like on personal and corporate levels. So this need is about the same in Corona times and out of them. And it is always crucial. I'm not saying it's about the same because it's non-existent. You always need it. So here is what me and my colleagues think is needed and how to get it. The IT training the InfoSec training needs to be tailored to the use case. So IT professionals require a different set of skills compared to regular users. Everyone requires the following: functional understanding of how technologies work. So you don't need to understand how networking works specifically, like handshake protocols and stack and whatever. However, everyone who uses email needs to understand what happens in general terms when you click send. Okay? You need to understand that your email travels, through servers and so on and so on. But just basically, you don't need to know exactly how it works, but you need to know what happens. Okay? And then this makes it a lot easier to understand the mechanics of an incident. So what are the goals of a breach? How exploitation of humans works? What makes us vulnerable, right? And then you need the ability to more frequently detect intrusion attempts. And once you understand, first of all, how things function, and you understand how incidents work, then, basically you combine the two and you are a lot better at detecting when something happens. And then you need to understand how to properly respond to an incident. So if you're a regular user, you need to do it in a different way. You need to know how to talk to IT people so they don't disparage you and tell you that you're a moron. But if you're an IT person, you need to understand how to talk to the, to the PR staff, and you need to understand how to talk to the management, because none of these people have degrees in computer science and they don't really need them. You need to explain things so that they will explain things further on, to other people. So IT and security professionals need more details, but roughly the same knowledge, okay? All of this needs to be delivered by people who do not fetishize technology and who know full well that complicated solutions decrease security levels, not increase them. Luckily, there are options available for everyone. So contact me if you wish to know more. My email is on every slide. Thank you. Questions?
Thank you, Dr. Moditz, for this insight into security issue. I guess we will all be a little bit more careful, or if not that, a little bit worried.
Also, there's a question.
Yeah, if there is questions, maybe you can put yourself, unmute and put your camera on. It will be much easier.
There's a question in chat by Valentin.
Okay.
Who said, what about free open source software?
Oh, we don't see it. I think he maybe sent it only to you.
Yeah, he sent it only to me. Yeah.
Okay, then read it out loud.
Yeah. What about free open source software? That's the question. So, what about it? It's so as a model, I think it's brilliant because it's constantly community checked. So, you know, we know how it works. And well, just to be clear, so open source does not equal free. Okay, so a good friend of mine has said, and I agree to an extent, he said, well, Linux is free only for people whose time has no value. And, you know, I agree completely. So that doesn't change the fact that all my servers are Unix based. However, I don't live under the misapprehension that this is free. It's not free. It takes my time to administer them, and my time is worth money. So, so this is not free. What do you mean with Jitsi? I'm not familiar with that. Does anybody know, you know, what Jitsi is?
Open source meeting app.
Oh, you mean, so basically just for this specific thing. So we at Free, we use Big Blue Button for meetings, which requires your own infrastructure. However, you know, all the recordings, everything is said by you yourself. It's open source. So, but it requires, you know, a bit of, you know, technical skills and some infrastructure in place. So luckily, you know, we've just applied for, you know, for some funding to do like implementation manuals for people. So, you know, if we get that, then, you know, Big Blue Button is a good solution. Matthias. So as far as open, you know, free open source software is, so it's not free, but open source I really support. I like it. I mean, I use it for, you know, for lots of purposes. However, not for everything. Okay. Something happened. Oh, you've changed the screen.
Yeah, I just put this on, but if there is some more questions, of course.
Yeah, I just lost chat. Hang on.
Oh, you lost.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I'm gonna get it back.
Okay. Otherwise,
I have chat here. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not free in a way that it takes more time than mainstream solutions. It doesn't take more time. It just takes time. So, you know, I'm sure that it would take me a lot more time to use, like, you know, Microsoft solutions, like as far as servers are concerned, because I'm not familiar with them. I'm familiar with Unix. I've used it for years. So for me, I enjoy having complete control, but it's not free. It's a mistake people often make, to basically say, well, because I pay nothing for it initially, you know, the total cost of ownership is zero. It's not.
Thank you. I see the debate was quite vivid, and but we are kind of running out of time. But there is still possibility to use the Hoover application, and that enables up to where you can meet the speakers and attendees and organizer. You can talk to them and you can post questions and create discussion topics, meetups, and share articles. So please be welcome to use it, and you will find the link in the chat box. And of course, we would appreciate very much if you would also rate this session. I hope you enjoyed it as I did very much. Thank you, Dr. Modis, for it. And mention again, this event was organized by University of Ljubljana and University of Maribor, by its knowledge transfer offices, with the support of our industry partner. And this festival would not have been possible without the support of the Republic of Slovenia and European Union under the European Regional Development Fund. So also, UNI.MINDS is still very active. Here you can see the agenda for the next few days. Please check it out. Check where you feel most passionate about and apply to our session, because we'll have still a lot of fun. So for the end, thank you for being with us. Take care, keep an open mind, and see you at our next events. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Hang on, are you kicking